Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Welcome to the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am their host with the absolute most, Ethan. You know what we're getting down. It's a Monday here, so when you hear this, it will be Monday. You know what it is. The day I record this is a special day, and I'll let you guys know later on in the podcast why it's so special. But for the most part, you know, I hope everybody who's listening is staying safe and, you know, trying to get a hold of themselves and their thoughts and feelings at, you know, a very, very stressful time to be living in the United States. And it would be weird to me if I did not mention that what's going on in America is something that has been building up for a very long time. So please try to understand people's feelings and, you know, practice empathy before you point the finger. All right. That's all I would like to say on that for now. What we're going to be talking about: college football. Do 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 do. I love that. I miss it a lot. And I can't wait for college game day to come back and all this stuff. But what are we talking about today as far as college football? We're going to be talking about some players from the Pac-12. Like, you know, last week we talked about players from the Big Ten, the best ones returning to 2020. And we're going to be doing the same with the Pac-12. And we're probably going to be going around all the Power 5 conferences, so to speak. Then we're going to be talking about of course, some transfer news like we usually do, some recruiting changes in the NCAA, and of course, SEC has some interesting grad transfer things going on. But first, we're going to be talking about playoff concerns in the NCAA. So here we go. Playoff concerns. So, of course, the playoff committee votes on who gets to be in the top 4 in order to go into the semifinals of the college football playoff. They do it every year, and they have been since 2015. And Gary Barta, who is the chairman of the college football playoff, and he is also the athletic director for Iowa, I believe, if I remember correctly. He is the athletic director for Iowa, yes, sure. And, you know, their job has gotten a lot tougher because in these unprecedented amount of times in sports, we really do not know exactly how things are going to be handled when it comes to evaluating the top 25 and evaluating the top 4 for the college football playoff. But Barta has made it clear that this is not going to change their principles on the matter. So they do plan on having summer meetings. I believe they're going to be having about 13 or so meetings before they even get to, because, you know, they vote, the first time they'll vote, of course, will be, or the first time they'll vote and have their rankings will not be until November. But the 13-member selection committee will be having planning meetings later this summer. So they need to put together a methodology and a process that follows the principles and identities and identifies who that committee believes are the best 4 teams to play in the playoffs. So the principles stay the same. So the principles are considered for selecting the 4 teams include conference championships, strength of schedule, head-to-head competition, comparative outcomes of common opponents, and factors such as key injuries that may have affected a team's play during the season or could affect its play in the postseason. So those principles aren't supposed to change, says Barta. They shouldn't change, and they're not going to change, and that's how they're going to base what they move forward. The methodology will change because, like everything else is changing rapidly, going back and forth. But the same principles do apply, and that's the thing that they're trying to beat home about, that the same principles will apply. He's spoken about being comfortable flying to Dallas for meetings and expecting to practice social distancing in the meeting rooms. And hopefully between now and then there'll be testing and maybe a miracle that they'll have a vaccine by then. That's really wishful thinking, but that's something to hope for. He can't speak. He says he can't speak for every athletic director, but he can tell, being with them virtually every day, that they share the same ups and downs that he does every day. And one day he thinks that it's a no-brainer we're going to do it, and the next day he's concerned because he hears something new. So everybody's going through planning for a full season and trying to figure out, is it just going to be in conference, or are they going to play the full season like it was supposed to be announced back then? And, you know, everybody's preparing for a season with full stadiums, to a season with no fans, to a season with as minimum or as maximum amount of fans that they can put, to the minimum amount of fans that they can have in the stadium, which was probably 0. But they're trying to prepare for all of these things. They're trying to prepare for what's going to happen with season ticket holders and things like that, and boosters, and if there's going to be no kids on campus, and if there are going to be kids on campus, and if they're going to have fall semester in general. They're trying to prepare for all of these things. They're trying to make contingency plans. They're trying to think ahead, forward. And there's a lot of stress on athletic directors at this point, to where it seems like the college football starting is really just, they're trying to force something that might be kind of out of reach at this point. We got to see where the next couple weeks lead us to see where we are standing. Because as of right now, we're only talking about workouts, and that's great. That's a start, but we really have no idea how any of this is going to happen. You know, they're preparing. He says they're preparing for a football to be a full season, and they're preparing for football with fans, and they're preparing for football with as many fans as they want to come, and then scaling it back down from there. And he thinks that there's a good confidence level on the 28th of May with 100 days left to the first kickoff. And he said, ask me again in another 50 days when we're 50 days out, and we'll see if we have the same answer. And I think that's the bottom line a lot of people are getting to at this point, is that it may just be too early to tell exactly where the outlook is. It's all fine and dandy to say that we expect college football to come back, and we're pushing for college football to come back. There is no date. It's hard to believe, one, that college football is going to come back at the same schedule time as they are supposed to, regularly supposed to come back. The NFL is in similar conversations. We know the NFL is trying to be on track to come back at its normal amount of time, and does not want delays, so to speak. But it's really hard to see where they will not be delayed in coming back. The NBA is still on the very tail ends of trying to make sure that they can confirm that they're going to work for making the season come back in late July. So everybody's kind of trying to figure out how to bring their sports back piece by piece. As you saw earlier this week, the Premier League is coming back. La Liga is coming back. A lot of these sporting events are starting to pop back up and announce return dates for their live sporting events. The U.S. was a bit behind the 8 ball as far as everything that involved Corona. So everything is kind of delayed for us, and we don't really have an answer of when things will decidedly find its way back into a viable date, something that can be put into paper, something to look forward to, a deadline. because everything is so new. We have no idea how to make this work because we never had this before. We never had to do this before, and it's unprecedented territory. So they're going to need all the time in the world to make sure they think of every contingency. You got to remember, these guys aren't getting paid as in the athletes. So that's a whole nother thing, that how much is worth bringing in these people to play games, especially like bowl games and things that may not be as necessities. You may think that sports is not a necessity. If you are listening to this podcast, you probably think sports are a necessity. But to the average person who may not be into sports, they may be thinking that trying to bring all these sports back, what does that really do for anybody besides fill your pockets? So with that said, this is going to be our first break into the podcast, and coming out of it, we are going to be talking about the Pac-12.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so coming back in, previously we were just talking about playoff concerns for college football and the committee and what they were planning to do in order to make sure that their principles still apply when it comes to figuring out the top 25, the top 4, all that and more. We just finished talking about that. Now we're getting into the top 10 returning players in the Pac-12 according to Pro Football Focus, and they are one of the more trusted football websites, college, NFL, fantasy, around on the internet, and probably my favorite source to read different articles and different things and get information from. So they have set up a top 10 list, and we're starting from 10 up. So number 10 is Dileve Owuzurike from Washington. So over the past 2 seasons, Levy has been the 9th most valuable interior defensive lineman, just a spot ahead of the 2020 first round NFL prospect Javon Kinlaw, so you guys know that name. He took a step back when he increased his workload from a role player to a starter, taking his 90.8 overall grade in 2018 down to 82.5 in 2019, but he's easily one of the 5 best defensive linemen returning into college football in 2020, and Owuzurike can play nose tackle or 3 technique at the high level, and he has placed himself in the top 10 at each alignment in 2-year Pro Football Focus grades. He's been effective both against the run and when rushing the passer, and he's missed just 4 of his 95 tackling attempts in his career at Washington. Just keep that in mind. 4 out of 95 attempts. 4 out of 95 attempts. That is insanity. You know how crazy that sounds? That's absolutely nutty. That is crazy. He's only missed that many tackles. 4 out of 95 tackle attempts. He's missed 4. 4. That's a guy who's going in the top 15 of the draft. That's a guy. That's a guy right there. Number 9, tight end Bryant Keith from from Utah. Utah is losing a lot of great talent to the NFL this season. Of course, you know, Zach Moss, Tyler Huntley, Terrell Burgess, Jalen Johnson, and Julian Blackman. So it's 5 most valuable players from 2019 are all headed for the draft in 2020 or all got drafted. And the Utes return 1 of their 10 most valuable players from 2019 squad, with Brent Keith being one of the best tight ends returning overall. He had a 84.7 overall grade and was the 3rd best in 2019 at his position, and he was easily the most explosive. Among tight ends to see at least 40 targets last year, he generated an explosive play of 15-plus yards on 37% of his targets, the highest in the country, and over 15% points above the average. So he was great on the catch, averaging 8 yards after the catch per reception, and was one of the most productive tight ends in the country with 2.7 yards per route run. That's actually a pretty interesting stat, seeing yards per route run. But he really is a guy who you might be looking at later on in the NFL draft, seeing guys who, he's one of those Travis Kelce types, he's one of those Jimmy Graham types. He can get it done, and he's explosive. He may not be the best blocker, but he's definitely one of the better pass-catching tight ends, and that's what the NFL is really thriving on right now. So he's definitely somebody to keep on your radar for this upcoming season. Number 8 is Thomas Graham Jr. out of Oregon, the cornerback. So Thomas Graham Jr. has been a starter for the Ducks since the very second week of his true freshman season in 2017 and progressed into one of the best cornerbacks in the country the past couple seasons by producing a 2-year coverage grade that is among the 10 best at his position. He's been tough to shake off on horizontal routes, particularly on the shallow ones, defending those routes 9 yards or less downfield. Graham has intercepted 2 and forced more incompletions, 9 incompletions, and first downs allowed 7, leading the way of just a 40 passer rating allowed, which is excellent and very, very tough to do in a very pass-happy spread offense style conference that is the Pac-12. So you're going to be seeing a lot of good cornerbacks come out of the Pac-12. Not to say that you don't see good cornerbacks come from everywhere, but the Pac-12 has been notorious for bringing out some of the better cornerback prospects that we've seen in our game, and it looks like we're going to see another one in Thomas Graham Jr. as well. On the edge at number 7 is Kayvon Thibodeaux out of Oregon, so another Oregon player, coming in the 2019 season as the best recruit of his true freshman class. Thibodeaux had a lot of expectations to fulfill, and he just did that. Out of every true freshman season we have recorded, as in Pro Football Focus, they have the recorded by an edge defender. His 2019 was by far the most valuable. His 79.9 pass rush grade was second only to the NFL prospect Bradley Anae of Utah and in the Pac-12. So the fact that he won over 16% of his pass rush reps as a true freshman in a Power 5 conference is unimaginably impressive. And they say do not be surprised if he becomes a household name through the 2020 season. So this guy is looking to be a beast. And he already had a beastly first season, and it's going to be the second season. And it looks like he is going to really, really thrive. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out in the third season after this one, his third, because I would like to see how he holds up, because Oregon has a pretty good secondary. And, you know, secondary and edge rush do go hand in hand a lot of the time. Then we're moving to our first quarterback on the list, Kendon Slovis from USC. So, of course, we're going to be talking more about USC later on in the news. But they found himself a gem, according to Pro Football Focus, who Kendon produced the 35th best passing grade as a true freshman all time. So one of the biggest things you want in a quarterback is sharp accuracy, and he displayed that. In fact, he led every single FBS quarterback in percentage of accurate passes thrown when targeting 10 or more yards downfield, 62%, according to Pro Football Focus's ball charting process. So a lot of this stuff they have a lot of testing, a lot of things that they check in on. And yes, that was the higher rate than even Joe Burrow, and he produced a rate of 20 percentage points higher than the FBS average too. The fact that he did that as a true freshman is quite remarkable, and has little to no mobility and needs to work out of the pocket presence, but that can be coached. So there are things he still needs to work on. He is a true freshman, but he has 3 years worth or 2 more years worth of eligibility to play and to learn up. So what you can't coach are the routinely accurate passes that he throws. So it's really hard to coach up accuracy. It's hard to coach up really having that pinpoint arm that only really the gifted end up developing over time. And it's one of the skills that a lot of people don't really cherish as much as you think. So let's go back down from 10 to 6, and we'll get into the top 5 coming up. So, of course, we have the defensive interior lineman, Levi Obuzurike from Washington, who looks like he's going to be a beast. Bryant Koof from Utah. Thomas Graham Jr. from Oregon. Kevon Thibodeau from Oregon as well, the edge rusher. Those two are going to be a scary combo next year. I can't wait to see just what they're able to accomplish between the two of them. And then, of course, we have our first quarterback out of USC. And we all know that this is the reason why we saw JT Daniels end up going into the transfer portal, because he did not want to compete with a true freshman that essentially came in and replaced him. And I feel like he did the right decision in going out to transfer, because, time waits for no man, and especially in college football where it's always the next big thing. It's always the next best thing, especially when, your best availability or your best ability is availability. That's what all the old folks tell me. And it's probably one of the things that I keep in mind all the time. Your best ability is availability. And he was available, and he showed out his freshman season, and he was able to really produce. We're going to be moving into the top 5 in the next segment, so please stay tuned and listen in. This is the GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So we just finished going over the first part of the top 10, and by first I mean 10 through 6, of the Pac-12 players returning to the 2020 college football FBS season. And now we're going to go from 5 to 1 right here, right now. Here we go. Number 5, cornerback Trent McDuffie out of Washington. Like Michael Wright, who is still on this list, Trent McDuffie was and still is one of the top recruits entering his true freshman season, and ended as one of the best players at the position. So McDuffie started all but one game for Washington this past season and produced an 83.7 coverage grade on his reps while finishing as the 12th most valuable corner in the FBS. McDuffie proved that he could hang with the big dogs right from the get-go, and he lined up in press coverage in the 5th most and had the 7th highest coverage grade on those plays. You don't see that too often from a true freshman. He looks like he is going to develop in something that we have to keep our big eyes on. Our big eyes are 2 eyes. Open your 3rd eye, brother. So, speaking of Mykael Wright, he's on this list at number 4. So, Mykael Wright was one of the top cornerback recruits coming into Oregon. He ended up his true freshman campaign as one of the best cornerbacks in college football. He had a limited role due to Oregon's depth at the position, but allowed just 8 catches on 23 targets in coverage while forcing 4 combined interceptions and pass breakups. Out of those 23 targets, he forced tight coverage on 17 of them, not to mention he did not miss one of his 25 tackling attempts. It'll be interesting to see how Oregon opts to use Wright considering the returns on all its corners, but he is more than proved to see the field more than 306 snaps he had in 2019. And this is one of the more interesting things about college football, as you really do see that depth at positions in college football can be really, really, really something else. So he's trying to find a way to get more playing time. He looks to be a stud, but, you know, he can get on the field. It's not like a quarterback situation where he will not see the field. But as a corner, you know, he gets limited bump, limited play time. But in his number of time being played, he showed a lot of promise to be fourth on this list. That's insane. He's better on this list according to Pro Football Focus as far as ratings and rankings go and grades and things like that. He is fourth out of all that talent we just went through. So let's go back and, you know, Thomas Graham is at 8th on this list. And then we also have other sort of we have other Washington guys too, who, of course, you know, Trent McDuffie. And there's just a lot of corners on this list. And him being at 4th, only having one true freshman season is really cool. And we have more cornerbacks to go. It just looks like I said, the Pac-12 is filled with defensive back talent. Number 3, Elijah Molden from Washington. So it's just defensive backs everywhere, man. Elijah Holland. Holland was the best in the slot for a longer period, so he gets the nod over Washington's Elijah Molden. But the higher grade slot corner of 2019 was none other than Molden. He had the highest grade of 2019. This was the junior's first full season as a starter for the Huskies, and clearly it worked out for both parties. He was the 4th most valuable cornerback in college football, largely because of the saving tackles that he routinely made in the slot in the past season. Molden had 26 defensive stops, which are basically tackles that constitute as a loss for the offense. That was 9 more than second, and 14 more than third. So he really, really was a clutch tackler. He knew how to finish tackles, and he was one of those guys in the slot that you can trust to really get down and stick with his man and be able to secure tackles for loss or for offensive loss altogether to end drives. That's clutch, and you need that at your corner slot position for sure. Number 2 is Javon Holland out of Oregon. So Oregon is literally just running the table as far as cornerback talent. Them and Washington on this list. So ever since Javon Holland stepped foot on the field as a true freshman in 2018, he has been one of the best players on the field. He manned the slot for the Ducks and produced the highest 2-year coverage grade at the alignment than anyone else. Holland was mostly a safety in 2018, but he even played the box and deep safety at a high level. He tracks the ball incredibly well and has combined for 20 interceptions and pass breakups over the past 2 seasons. In that same span, Holland has been the 3rd most valuable defensive back in the country behind Derek Stingley Jr. And even though he's only played 1 season and that being that good, in 2020 first-round prospect Christian Fulton. So he's going to be one of the more scouted and more looked at cornerback talents coming out, since it is going to be his 3rd season there and he's going to be looking to come out into the draft. So that'll be something to look forward to. And then number 1 is an offensive lineman out of Oregon, Penei Sewell. It's unlikely that any offensive lineman will ever win the Heisman Trophy. The last time anyone to play the position finished in the top 5 voting was back in 1996 when Ohio State's Orlando Pace finished 4th. That being said, Oregon offensive tackle Penei Sewell should most likely certainly be in the Heisman conversation leading into the 2020 season. There's never been an offensive lineman that posted a higher grade than his 95.5 last year. He allowed just 7 pressures on 491 pass block snaps. 7 out of 491 pass block snaps, and opened up massive holes in the run game as well, and he recorded a 95.3 grade in that facet. His 2019 campaign was far and away the most valuable season we have seen from an offensive lineman. And just for, I guess, context, he matched an unprecedented year in 2020, and not only should he be taken within the first few picks of the draft, he should be the first offensive lineman to crack the top 5 in Heisman voting for the first time in nearly 25 years. So this season, his WAA in 2019 was better than Kevin Dotson in Louisiana, 2019. Ryan Ramczyk in Wisconsin in 2016, who was one of the best one of the best linemen in football. Matt Rothman in 2014 and for Pittsburgh had a .34. Quentin Nelson, Notre Dame in 2017 is better than him. And Shaq Mason from Georgia Tech, and he was better than him. That is that's insane that he's that good. So just keep in mind, this is a guy that we're going to have to be really, really careful to look at all across the board. So let's go back and give not only proper props and saying their names again, but just to remind ourselves who these guys are. So we have 4 out of the top 5 of cornerbacks, but Trent McDuffie, Washington, this is going to be his second season with Washington, and he's going to be looking to go and really, really make sure he states his place in the Pac-12 as one of the better cornerbacks out there. It's going to be tough to win awards in this sort of atmosphere. Then we have Mikael Wright, somebody who had a really, really nice freshman campaign, although he only saw 306 snaps, and he's looking to get more playtime. Then we have Elijah Molden out of Washington, who was one of the best graded cornerbacks in the slot, and he made a lot of defensive stops, 26 of them, and he had 9 more than the first and 14 more than the second person in that category. Then we have Javon Holland out of Oregon, who has been one of the best cornerbacks in the country since he stepped on the Ducks field in 2018, and he has been the third most valuable cornerback in the country, only behind Derek Stingley and the first-round draft pick Christian Fulton. So then we also finish it off with Penei Sewell, the tackle out of Oregon. So Oregon is really, really stacked with a lot of talent, and being one of the top Power 5 teams in the country, of course, this is not to be any surprise, but there are some people that you can't sleep on. Utah still brings in a lot of talent, and of course, we see Washington has a lot of defensive talent as well. As you know, in the Pac-12, you got to be ready for the pass, and that's just how it is. But all right, so that's your top 10 of the Pac-12. We're going to continue to do this week in, week out about different conferences and different Power 5 schools. So we're going to take another break, and we're going to get into some transfer news, at least a big one.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so coming back into GSMC College Football Podcast. A surprise came down to Athens. A surprise came down to Athens. A surprise came down to Athens. And a surprise it was. JT Daniels has announced that it is going to do a transfer to Athens to play for UGA, or at least be under the coaching staff. So, in a surprise turn of events, the former 5-star recruit has been added to the quarterback room of UGA, former quarterback for Southern Carolina, USC, and he has declared that he is transferring to Athens. He was the class of 2018, his freshman season, and he was the number 2 ranked pro-style quarterback in the country, and being a Santa Ana, California native, he was really a Trojan all his way through high school. The alumni of Mater Dei High School played 11 games for USC in 2018 as a true freshman, and he completed 59% of his passes, so that's 216 of his 363 attempts for 2,672 yards, and he finished with 14 touchdowns to 10 interceptions on his record. But he only played in one game in 2019, the Trojans opener, before injury ended his season, unfortunately. USC came out of that game still with the win versus Fresno State. And then, of course, like we just spoke about, his true freshman, as a true freshman sophomore quarterback, suffered a knee injury, and it both tore his ACL and meniscus. So it was a pretty messy injury, and that was the last time we saw JT Daniels touch the field, and he entered the transfer portal in April 2016. So Kirby Smart usually is a guy who finds a way to bring talent to the Dogs, and he does it again. And sometimes they're not always conventional. They're not always through recruiting. Sometimes it is through, like recently, he has found ways to bring transfers to Georgia, and he is stockpiling talent in the quarterback room. He's done it before, and he's doing it now. And it's been proven that his tenure with the Dogs, however, with Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett, DeJuan Mathis already on the roster, and Brock Vandergarf, who committed to Georgia in the class of 2021, it'll be really interesting to see where they handle all this personnel, and they just keep getting talented players at the bottom line. So that's the first thing that you have to think about. So there's 3 things here that I want to really touch on. Number 1 is Georgia finds a way to keep bringing in more and more personnel to their team, and really find ways to stack their team to look like they are ready to make the jump. And by look like they are ready, I mean they've looked like they've been ready to win multiple national championships every preseason, every pre-rankings, ever since they did go early in when they played Alabama, when they did not, unfortunately for them, they did not finish it out. But since then, they have been one of the top-ranked teams in the country year in and year out, and their recruiting has been top-notch. They have been arguably the best recruiting team in college football, and they've had some of the better recruits on both sides of the ball, offensive line, defensive tackles, running backs, of course. They have been calling themselves running back U for quite some time, and it's held up for sure. You know, they've had great defensive players like Roquan Smith come into the draft and be really strong impact players immediately in the NFL. Of course, we know about Nick Chubb. We know about Sonny Michel. We know about these guys. So we know Georgia produces high quality NFL level talent. And it doesn't just come from recruiting. It also comes, of course, from the transfer portal. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is that UGA has a thing about quarterbacks, and they'll have too many good ones, man. We saw this. We had to watch, of course, a quarterback leave Georgia in order to go to Ohio State to get some play time, and he felt like that was needed to happen. So we saw Justin Fields. Justin Fields decided to say, hey, this isn't working out for me. I need to go. And a lot of people said that he should have waited his turn. A lot of people think he shouldn't have left. Or, for instance, a lot of people thought that Jake Fromm was not the guy to get them over the hump. And they said that they should have started with Justin Fields. But they elected to keep Fromm over Fields. And I'm not sitting here to thrash on Fromm. I think Fromm could potentially be a nice player in the NFL. And everybody just talks about how wicked smart he is and all this. But we all know that X's and O's in the locker room don't necessarily produce quality quarterback play on the field. But without that being said, you know, Jake Fromm clearly did not have everything together, and the offense was struggling for Georgia all last year. So maybe in hindsight, you look at it and say maybe you did need somebody who could be dynamic with his legs along with the passing game out there. But Georgia really does, first and foremost, depend on the run game, and that's never going to change. And even though DeAndre Swift is no longer there, they still expect to have a really, really beefy rushing attack anyway. So bringing in more guys who fit in the traditional sense. So let's look at this. The guys who they've played, for the most part, since Kirby Smart has been there, have been these pro-style, kind of bulky quarterbacks. So we saw Jacob Eason before Jacob Eason had the transfer. And then we saw Jake Fromm. And then when Jake Fromm and, of course, Justin Fields came around, they ended up still taking Fromm. And then from Fromm, now we have guys coming in from all different sorts that look kind of to be the same sort of archetype that Kirby Smart tends to go with at the quarterback position. So when you're looking at who could be the guy to take the job, you got to look at some of these archetypes for sure, because this is number 2. Archetypes matter to coaches. Coaches have game plans. Coaches have ideologies. Coaches have methodologies of playing the game a certain way that they see and find successful. And if Kirby Smart finds that running the football, having a pro-style quarterback, play action, methodical drives, not really being overly explosive in the passing game is the way to win in the SEC, and more importantly, the way to get back to the national championship, then he's going to do that more times than not. And Athens people, UGA supporters have to understand that. Now, they do have explosive players. They have incredible defensive interior linemen, incredible defensive linebackers. They have good defense. They have players who are some of the most talented players in the country, year in, year out, to come into Georgia. But if they can't get past this offensive block, so to speak, this offensive mindset, in my opinion, I don't know what exactly they plan to do. It's going to take a super transcendent quarterback to be really good in pocket presence, because what we've seen over the years is that you need explosiveness out of your quarterback position, be it dynamic arm, be it just super, really, really otherworldly athleticism, extreme amounts of confidence. You need something there to really bring you home. Like, look at this. Tua Tagovailoa, mobility, extreme poise, excellent arm talent, and unreal accuracy in the college scene. Deshaun Watson, he's literally Michael Jordan of college football. Joe Burrow exudes extreme confidence, a hot hand, great arm, all the package, and tough as I don't know what. You see all these guys come in and win championships and do this, that, and the third. And then you see Trevor Lawrence, who is a quarterback room's dream scenario. You see these guys coming in and they're winning championships because they have the quarterback talent to do it. And I don't think Georgia has had the quarterback talent to do it in quite some time. And honestly, they might have let one go. They might have let a dynamic player at that position go already. But that's just how I personally feel about it. And that was number 3. It's just that you need to find somebody who's dynamic. So we're going to take our next break, and then coming out, we're going to be talking about recruiting processes being extended and the SEC grad transfer rules changing up a bit. So that's coming up on the GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Okay, so before we went to break last time, we were talking about former 5-star recruit that came from Santa Ana, JT Daniels, going to UGA, the doghouse in Athens. And now we're going to be getting to a little bit more general news about the NCAA all around and a little bit about the SEC as well. But the NCAA extends recruiting dead period through July 31st. So on Wednesday, the NCAA's Division I Council Coordination Committee announced that it was going to extend the period through July 31st for all sports. It does not include just football, but all sports. The committee previously extended the recruiting dead period through June 31st in its announcement 2 weeks ago. And the extension maintains consistent recruiting rules for all sports and allows coaches to focus on the student athletes who may be returning onto campus, said council member Grace Calhoun, athletic director for Pennsylvania. The committee is committed to reviewing the dead period again in late June or early July. So college football already has had a dead period from June 22nd to June 24th, but now there will be no official visits allowed through the end of July. For men's basketball, the dead period extension removes evaluation periods that programs have scheduled through June and July, a time when campus visits would normally have been permitted. Women's basketball programs normally would have been allowed to host prospects for on-campus visits for a whole month of June. In the same announcement, the committee stated their strength and conditioning coaches would be allowed to virtually observe workouts for safety reasons only at the request of student athletes beginning June 1st. So, like I said, they have extended recruiting dead period through July 31st, and it's the only way to keep things really, really moving forward, to think about the current and not about the future, because we don't know if we're going to be able to move towards the future anytime soon faster than anybody else. So now we're going to be moving towards the SEC. So the SEC eases admissions rule for grad transfers and matching new NCAA legislation. So the Southeastern Conference has had a relaxed admissions rule has relaxed the admission rules governing graduate transfers. So during their virtual spring meeting last Thursday, SEC presidents and chancellors approved of a proposal to ease a restriction that required graduate transfers to enroll in graduate school at his or her new school. The new legislation, an amendment to a bylaw, allows grad transfers to pursue a second undergraduate degree, according to the proposal obtained by Sports Illustrated. The SEC's decision aligns its policy with that of the NCAA, which made the change to its graduate transfer legislation in April. The previous policy steered an athlete's education down the path that it may not have preferred. With greater enrollment options now, athletes are free to pursue the second major in the same way he or she could have done at the previous school. Admission standards at graduate programs can be stringent and often complicated. The new legislation will reduce tensions created between athletics and academic departments in locating graduate programs for athletes who may not lack necessary practical experience to be admitted. The proposal reads, administrators at Arkansas, South Carolina, and Missouri made the proposal, and it's effective for those graduate transfers enrolling August 1st or later. So for coaches, this offers another avenue to land graduate transfers, a sweeping trend in college football over the last couple of years. Graduate transfers can play immediately, and some even enter their new schools with 2 years of eligibility. Joe Burrow, the former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback of LSU, is one of the most recent high-profile examples of a transfer who graduated from the previous school, Ohio State, with 2 years left of eligibility. He was a redshirt junior when he enrolled in LSU in May 2018. The graduate transfer rule was intended to assist academically high-achieving students in pursuing a degree that may not have been offered at their undergraduate college. But it has become a tool for players to find more playing time and for coaches to plug holes on their rosters. From 2013 to 2018, The NCAA says the number of grad transfers have been more than doubled. Grad transfers are most prevalent in men's basketball, with 2.8% or 2.6% of current players are graduate transfers. Women's basketball, football, and men's and women's track and field, according to the data published by the NCAA in 2019, less than 1% of football players were graduate transfers in 2018, but that number has nearly tripled since 2013. The legislation adjusted a rule not often used as it was intended. Graduate programs can now be 2 and 3 year endeavors that few athletes complete. The 2-year degree completion rate for graduate transfers in football was 31%, according to the figures from the NCAA. So what does this all mean? It just means that guys have a better opportunity to find more play time and coaches have a better opportunity to find guys who can plug in their holes now or sooner rather than later and have them for a longer amount of time. And it's not always being on the rat race of finding the next guy. You can plug in holes if you did not find the right guy, and it helps build championship windows and keeps extending them as well. So this is great for coaches, this is great for players, and for guys who want to really, really get the most out of their education while also being involved in athletics. So this is an amazing thing, and I'm glad the SEC is looking into doing it. So, like I said, the undergraduate degree is a big time thing. Getting 2 degrees while you're in school, like we spoke about a few weeks ago, a lot of athletes will go to college and a lot of their degree paths are kind of tailor-made for them to really succeed no matter what. It's hard to, I don't want to say it's hard to fail on your own dime, because it's very easy to if you don't care. But if you care about playing football, you're going to care about your athletics, about your academics, and you are going to try and do well in your classes. But the classes are not rocket science, and honestly, classes are not really rocket science for any real major college student. It's just that when you're an athlete, it's much different because it's like you're doing a full-time job and you can't escape it because you're there all the time. But college, once you understand how to work college, so to speak, how to make college work for you, it's not that hard to go through your degree programs. And it really just does depend on what you are majoring in. So if somebody feels like they can, one, get a double major and still have opportunity to play at a high level somewhere else, and they didn't feel like they got enough play time or didn't get enough film set, for people to really feel like they are draft capable, draft usable, draftable, this is a great option for guys to go do. Now, this does mean that you're going to see just so many things happen with transfer portal stuff. So the grad transfer portal has been kind of the cheat code, and it looks like what people want to see in the one-time transfer rule, which got suspended till further notice, so to speak, because of the COVID-19. And they wanted people to really sit down and figure this thing out. And, typical NCAA fashion to do so. But in this time, I guess it's a little bit valid to do so, in my opinion, to sit down and really think about this, because at this unprecedented time, we don't really know what the effects of letting these people transfer out of programs. They've only been at 1 year, and then they don't know when they'll be able to get back on campus. And then there's just a lot of different things that come with grad transferring that might make it tougher on the student athlete than what would be wanted. And I think the NCAA is looking at that point of view while also trying to keep their best interests at heart as well. But we are going to move on to our last segment of the day. And it's going to be another concession confessions with a twist, because it is a special day that I'm doing this recording, and I cannot wait to talk about concession confessions with you coming up on the GSMC.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Okay, so for the last segment of the GSMC College Football Podcast, I have an announcement to make. Today is my birthday. The day I'm recording this is my birthday, May 31st, and I'll be 23 years old. So, well, I am 23 years old by the time you're listening to this. So, I gotta admit it, man. It feels good. I'm living life the best way I can. I'm doing dream stuff that I never thought that I'd end up being able to do, and I'm just very blessed and able to do the things that I love to do all the time. And it couldn't be a life any worth less living. So I love to live, or I meant the word switched up, man. So life is so much worth living right now, and I love what I do. So with that all being said, get that out the way. Happy birthday, all that. It would make my birthday feel really nice if you guys could reach out to GSMC via Twitter and ask me a question or tell me a story about your favorite college football moments across the platform. So to reach out, the @ is at GSMC College Football, and that's where you're going to find us. Excellent times are coming. So, without a doubt, here is Concession Confessions, the last segment of the day. And we're going to be talking about potatoes. Not all potatoes are made equal, people. And that is the bottom line, and that is the starting line, and it's the finishing line. So, potatoes are one of America's greatest comfort foods in any sort of eating environment. Mashed, fried, baked, fried again. So there's circular potatoes, potato skins, potato wedges, fries. Of course, gutted out potatoes, restuffed potatoes, loaded baked potatoes. Potatoes are everywhere, and they're one of America's greatest comfort foods, like I said. And when it comes to stadiums, ballparks, that sort of eatery, we can get a little bit weird about how we handle potatoes and what we do with them. So I came to air it out and clear some misconceptions and some ideologies that I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to potatoes, that a lot of people tend to walk the painted line, so to speak, on where they stand on the potatoes. Number one, we're not eating baked potatoes at a ballpark. Put it down. Put it down. Put it down. Put it down. Baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, those are dinner sides. You're not going to be eating dinner at a ballpark in the traditional sense. Unless you're like sweet level, then all our rules, this does not apply to sweets. We are not sweets people here on the GSMC. We do not have club sweets. We don't do that. When we talk about concession confessions, we are going to concession stands and concession food and food for the common man. So the common man is not eating mashed potatoes and or baked potatoes at concession stands. So to get that out the way, okay, so we all know about chili cheese fries and sometimes loaded fries or fried nachos, or some people like to call them things like that. We know about these sort of traditional dishes at sporting events. And I've eaten them before. I've had them before. I've liked some. I've liked some less than others. And all in all, the way to make a good loaded fries situation is you got to understand the principle. It all starts with the foundation. Everything in life, food, sports, cooking, lifestyle blogging, photography, art. Everything starts with your basic foundations because that is what you built upon. When you're building a house, you got to have a solid foundation or your house will crumble. Same thing with loaded fries / loaded fry nachos. If your fries cannot handle the weight and the pressure of what you're loading on the fries, then you are building a mess. You are not going to have an enjoyable meal experience from a texture standpoint to all the way to when you start from the first 5 minutes to the middle, you're already kind of feeling like this was not the best decision, but you got to push through because you already spent probably $11+ on said meal that does not include the drink and that does not include the side that you somehow had to get for somebody else waiting in line. So, what kind of fries can you do with loaded situation? When you're in the loaded, here are the recommendations. You may have to get with the sharper sort of steak fries and have a lot of them. So, we're not really too concerned about the healthiness of these fries and the amount of calories. At this point, you'd earn the day to not care. So, load them up. Stack them up. Steak fries are great because they can get really crispy and you need the crunch to have the texture against all these other things. So you got to think about this. These loaded nachos are going to be cheesy. They're probably going to have chili on them or some sort of pulled pork barbecue saucy green onion sort of, combination. So if you're just eating chili, it's going to feel more like a chili with soggy fries if you're using crinkle cut. And you would think crinkle cut would be more crispy, but by the time crinkle cut gets super crispy, it's probably overcooked. And you don't want overcooked fries. That's just not what you need in your life. So you got to use a more sharper edge, a more sharper potato. You can't use wedges. We don't even need to talk about wedges for real until we get to them. But you don't use wedges for these. You don't use, you don't want to use McDonald's fries, but you don't want to use fries too thin either. You got to have that perfect kind of steak fry consistency, something that really gives you a nice crunch, but doesn't sacrifice the potatoes being thinned out and too hard, but something to bring a nice consistent crunch all together in a package that will make your eating experience that much better. And that's loaded fries. You got to make sure the fries are able to hold that foundation because that's everything. More fry tips. When you're eating things like wings, crinkle cut is the king. And that's what it rhymes. When you're eating wings, crinkle cut is the king. They're easier to season and keep things going. They're easier to grab when your hands are saucy because they have the ridges. And for the most part, crinkle cut fries have a better way of being tolerable while not being 100% crispy at maximum perfection, and also finding its way to find perfection better than most fries. So once you see those brown edges on the ridges of the crinkle cuts, then you know you're in the game. You're ready to go. Perfect choice for wings. Then we move from everything else. So everything else kind of has their own way. Sometimes the gourmets do wedges. Wedges can get really heavy. Not to say that you're not eating heavy food anyway, but just keep that in mind. Wedges can get really heavy. They can cost more, and you're really getting less than what you think you might be because they're bigger and they take more space in your cup. They're not going to be filling your thing up like if you went to McDonald's at 3 a.m. and they're just giving you a whole load of the fries that they were going to make a fresh batch anyway. So they just gave you all the old ones and just put it in the bag. They're not doing that with wedges. Never will do that with wedges. When you get into the straight fries, so like fries that you see in like a Checkers or a Rally's and things like that, you'll see that typically with the burgers, the chicken sandwiches, maybe even the hot dogs if you do fries and hot dogs, but most people don't. You'll see that a lot more often. You just have to make sure they're properly seasoned or else they will just taste like bland nothingness. And that is just how I feel about it. But overall, potatoes are one of the backbone foods of American society. and it will likely never leave American society. And I, for one, would not like to see it leave. I love potatoes. All right. So that's a little happy birthday segment to me because I like talking about food and potatoes. So with that being said, this is the GSMC College Football Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to please rate and review the podcast. Every comment makes us be better at what we do, and every rating will help us reach our audience more and more. So reach more people like you guys. So that would be very, very helpful for us. Don't forget to follow our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So please, without further ado, this is the GSMC. Keep it locked in. We'll see you guys next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.